Good day, Android Studio coders. Today we are going to put the soul into our application, our Java code, the code that would run our application. In the past topic, we have discussed about designing our application, and basically this is the design that I have shown you. We have a text view, and we have 4 buttons here which would allow us to navigate to the content source of our application. So we have first, which would allow us to go to the first line in our content source, and then we have previous, next, and last. So these are the buttons in our application that allow us to navigate through the content source. And we have a topic on creating our content source. So this line by line, we have 10 lines here of quotes or jokes, and this is basically the same content that we have in our sample text file, and I have renamed it as jokesdata.txt. And now we have our Java code that would run our application. I have already created the skeleton of that. Of course, we have our onCreate method, and here I have 4 procedures or methods here, and this procedure or methods would be the one to be called by our buttons whenever each of them is clicked. So we have the method for first joke, and then we have the method for the last joke, and this first joke method would be connected to our first button here. We have the button here first. So if you look at the on click here, it's first joke, basically the same here, first joke, and then we have our last joke. So if you go to our last joke button here, we have here on click last joke. Okay, and the same for our previous and next. So we have here next, it's here next joke, and here we have previous joke. And we don't need to put a ID for the buttons here because we won't be referring to them in this application. What's important is that they have their on click here referring to the procedure or method that would be called whenever they are clicked. So let's proceed. Of course, the first thing to do is to declare some objects and variables. So previous lesson, we have included the string buffer as our objects, but we are not going to use it here because we are going to show the jokes line by line. We are not going to show them instantly, all of them, in the text view. So string buffer is only required if you want to show all the text in one go into the text view. So the first thing to do here is to declare our objects and variables. And the first object that we shall be declaring here is our text view object. So text view, and just let us name it the same, text view. And then we shall be declaring 2 sets of or 2 pairs of input stream and buffered reader here. The first pair of input stream and buffered reader would be used to count the number of lines in our content source, which is jokesdata.txt, and the second pair of input stream and buffered reader would be used to obtain the data from jokesdata.txt, and we shall be using them to put it into our string array. Okay, so first let's create our 2 sets of input stream and buffered reader pair. So first one is input stream count lines, and then buffered reader reader count lines. So okay, and then we another set is just name it input stream, and then buffered reader, just buffered reader. So first thing here inside our own create is to instantiate our text view object. So text view here, and then find view by ID. You have already done this before, so r.id dot TextView. This one is the name of our TextView inside our XML file. So this is here. The TextView is named TextView. Here, this one, it's named TextView. Okay, so let's go back, and after that, let's use our first pair to count the number of lines. But before that, we should have a variable which is an int variable, int count, and instantiate that to 0. And then let's declare the other ones later. So here we should have our stream count of lines, and then let's connect this to our data source, this dot get resources, okay, dot open row resource, because we are opening our content source which is inside our raw folder here. So open row resource, and then inside it r, since it's inside raw folder, r.raw here. Okay, you get it, r.raw dot the name of the raw resource. Okay, so we have that. Now we pass this into our buffered reader, our reader for counting lines. So reader count lines. Okay, so new buffered reader, and then new input stream reader, and then pass the name of the input stream here. The input stream object that we shall be using is the first one, so stream, which is here and instantiated here. So copy that. So it's here, and you copy this one, okay, and paste it there, and just put the semicolon there. Okay, so since we now have instantiated both the input stream and buffered reader, the first pair, we are now able to use the reader count lines to obtain the number of lines from our data source. So in order to do that, we shall be using a try catch block. So this is count number of lines from jokes data.txt. So use a try catch block there, and then catch the exception. So let's just name the exception E, and then E.print stack trace. Okay, and then inside this try block, we use a while. So so we are going to read each line in the content source, and while the line is not yet null, meaning there's still more lines to read, we shall increment this int count variable, which is an int variable. Okay, so while reader count lines dot read line not equals to null, then int count should be incremented by 1. Okay, so you can also write it like this, int count plus 1. Okay, but this is a long code, and we can just do this like this. Okay, so that's it. After this, you have obtained the number of lines from this data source, which is important so that we know if we are at the last part or the last part of our jokes, since we have this here, last and first. Okay, we know what part of the joke we are, the lines in our jokes data.txt, so that we can we prevent the app from getting an error if we ever get off the last line of code. Okay, no, what I mean is that we prevent the application from getting an error if we ever get off this last line. We cannot allow the data to go to the content of this text view to go to the line beyond the 10th, because that would be an error. Okay, so that's it. So in order to test this, we use again toast. It's important that you test this before proceeding. So toast make text this, and then we use a conversion here. So in order to do that, we convert this int into a string. So that would be string dot value, okay, string dot value of, okay, and then of course we convert the int count, whatever inside the int count, into a string. So int count, okay, and then after that use that to string, okay, and then after this, let's use a long toast here. Okay, and then that show. Okay, so if we run this app, we would be able to, if a toast shows the number of lines, which should be 10, we would be sure that our code is correct here. Okay, so let us test this now. Our code, our toast should show the value of 10. Okay, let's run this. Okay, it should show here a message 10. Okay, this is this. You see this? So it's 10. So we know that we have obtained the count of lines correctly. So we can now just delete this one. Okay. So that's the first part of our code. After that, we should proceed with the next part, which is to use the second pair of input stream and buffered reader. So the purpose of that is to be able to pass the contents of the content source, which is jokesdata.txt, into a string array. As we have discussed in the array in the previous video, we can put on each index of the array a value. So if the array is a string, on each index we could put each line of this content source. So we can put on the index 0 this first line, and so forth. So on the last line here, which is the 10th line of joke, we could put this on index 9. So if you have remembered correctly, the index of a string of an array, a string array at this example, or any array, would always start with 0. So the last index is always the length of the number of lines here minus 1, which would be in this case index 9. So let's proceed with doing that. But before we do that, let's create another int here that would this int is int current. We shall be using this to allow us to determine at which part of the lines is our at which part of the line here in this 1 to 10 is being displayed in our text view. So if int current is 7, that means the one being displayed is this line 7. Okay, we shall do that in our code, and also we shall not be instantiating this, because we shall be instantiating it once we are navigating in our content source. And last but not the least important, actually this is an important object here. We declare, or this is actually not an object, this is a variable. We declare a string array variable here. So string, and then open and close bracket, and then name the string array as text data. So you can name it whatever you want, but in this example I shall be using text data. Okay. So let's proceed. After we have obtained the number of lines, we shall be calling on our second pair of input stream and buffered reader objects. So input stream, so we can just copy here. This is basically the same. We're connecting to the same data source. Okay, but let's change this into input stream. Okay, and then same here. Okay, let's just write it so that you know, or you get used to typing your code. So buffered reader equals new buffered reader, and then new input stream reader, and then you pass the name of this input stream here. So input stream here, which has already obtained a connection to your data source, and then semicolon here. And then after that, we now instantiate. We have not yet instantiated this string array, which we name text data, on how long is it, right? You have not yet instantiated this because we need to tell our application or our code how long is this string array. So we do it here. Since we already have obtained the number of lines, we can pass it into our text data, which is a string array, like this. So text data equals new string array. Okay, and then we pass the value of the int count here, which is we have proven to be 10 in our code, in our toast message. Okay, so the size of our string array is now 10. Okay, and then again we need to put each line of this into our string array named text data. So again, we shall be using this buffered reader, this last pair, part of the last pair of input stream and buffered reader, and not this one. This one we shall be using, and we shall be putting it again inside a try catch block. So try, let's put the skeleton first of our try catch block, and then catch exception. Let's name it, instead of E, let's name it F, because we have already used E, and then F that print stack trace. Okay, and then inside the try catch, again we use a while code block. Okay, wait, not a while code block, we can use a for loop. So for, okay, let's put the skeleton of the code first. For int I equals 0, so we declare another int here, and then if I is less than the int count, okay, use a semicolon, not a comma there, and then I increment by 1. Okay, so what this code do is that we have an int which we named I, it instantiated to 0. Every time it's still below the int count, our int count is 10, right? In this case, or whatever is the size of our content source. So if it's still 0, we execute, if still less than int count, we execute everything that's here. So what we do inside here is to pass the value, pass every line here into text data, which is a string array, and then it would execute from 0 to 9, because 9 is still less than int count, which is 10, right? So that's why we start with 0. Okay, so the code for that is very simple. Your text data, which is a string array, you obtain the I, which starts at 0 here. So the first line, so the first index of your string array should contain whatever is obtained by your buffered reader here. Dot read line. Okay, So it's very simple. We have to obtain that, and since this is inside onCreate, you should load the first value here in this first line. So in order to do that, after your string array has obtained everything, you pass the first index into your text view. So text view dot set text, and then what's inside is the first index of your text data, which is 0. Okay, and since you are at the first line, in current is, I have told you before that it's 1, but no, it should be the same with your index number. So in current equals 0. So we know what part of you in the index. So your current should be the same as the value of your index, so that we know what part, or what part of the string array is being loaded. So if we do this now, we would be able to load the first line. So let's try this. Okay, we have loaded the first line here. So where do cows go for entertainment? To the movies. So let's do that again. And then you have the first line. So our code works, and we shall now be moving on to the other buttons. Actually, you have not yet gone into the buttons. This is just the instantiation of your onCreate when you first load your app. So after this, we shall be going on to provide the code for the 4 buttons.